You're listening to another episode of Tap Outs and Touchdowns.
As I scramble to make sure everybody knows where they can find us, Bill, we have reached yet another football episode of Tap Outs and Touchdowns. As always, it's your guy, Bully Rye, and we can't have a football show without my friend Banker Bill. Bill, what's going on, bud?
What's happening, man? Football talk time. I took a loss this week, and we have to get into it.
You took a loss this week.
I did take a loss this week. I'm proud of you, actually. I'm actually, because I feel like I've been pretty good at the stuff we did last week. But took a loss this week, so we'll get into it.
Listen, we're going to get into it because in all fairness, like, that's the one thing that you've taken an L with since we've been doing this, that I've got to, like, kind of do like the Conor McGregor walk to it. Just a quick reminder, if you're watching live with us, whether you're watching on Facebook.com/tapouts and touchdowns, YouTube or X, make sure you join the conversation and have fun with us talking football, because we're not just talking UFL tonight. The NFL draft came and went, and we are going to get into that as well. But before that, my favorite segment of the show is called Homer's Corner. And man, I've got a doozy for my Homer's Corner. Right before we came on the air, I asked Bill if he had heard the story regarding Carolina Panthers owner David Tepper that is once again in the news, and he had not. And so I get to talk more about why David Tepper continues to be the worst owner in sports. Prior to the NFL draft, there was a restaurant in the Charlotte area that has like one of those like promotional signs that reads, like fish special or buy one, get one, happy hour type deals, right?
Yeah.
But this sign in particular said, please let the GM make the picks, something along those lines. I don't remember exactly what the sign said. But David Tepper took it upon himself to go into this business and approach the host, like the person at the hostess stand, and remove the host's hat that he was wearing to give this business owner, this business, a hard time for a little ribbing that they did for David Tepper. After the draft, the restaurant decided to once again troll David Tepper and updated their sign that says "Hats off to the new Panthers." David Tepper is acting like I don't know I don't know who he thinks he is. He's not Tony Soprano. He is not. What can I say? The guy's name from The Godfather. He is not Vito Corleone.
No, good
but
one.
He is trying to throw his weight around in the city in which he owns a lot of stuff. And I hope that the community comes together and supports this local business. I probably should have gotten the name of the business to promote them on the show. Not like we're based out of Charlotte and we can give them some extra foot traffic. But the gall on this guy, who has not had a winning record since he took over as owner, was fined $300,000 earlier this year, back in January, for apparently throwing a drink at fans at the Jacksonville game down in Jacksonville when Carolina traveled down there. I will never not take the chance to call David Tepper the worst owner in sports. You don't do this. You don't see Jerry Jones going into a business telling Jerry Jones to fire himself as GM. Even Dan Snyder is, for as much of a scumbag as Dan Snyder was, you didn't see Dan Snyder going into businesses where people were supporting him selling the team to give people a hard time. David Tepper ought to be ashamed of himself. I have never meant this more than I mean this right now. Sell the team. You are the worst owner in all of American professional sports. You are a joke. You are insert adjective here. I don't know you personally, but based off what I've seen since you've taken over this team, with your empty promises and your I just want to win here, you are the biggest piece of dung ever laid in the city of Charlotte, North Carolina. Sell the team. Sell the team. That's my Homer's Corner. Bill, I think you have a much more exciting, maybe a much more upbeat
Homer's Corner this week. Maybe a little bit more positive than it's yeah. I like that Homer's Corner. That was good. I'm excited.
Didn't make for a good soundbite.
The Miami Dolphins picked up the 5th-year options on the two Jalen's, Jalen Waddle, Jalen Phillips. Obviously going to pay them some more money coming up soon, but get them for an extra year for sure in Miami. That makes me very excited. These guys are both electric players. Jalen Waddle, I don't think either one of them, to be honest, have hit their peak yet, their prime, that their actual, top of their abilities. So I'm excited. They did officially pick up their two options this week, just a few days ago. And man, I'm kind of over the moon about it, to be honest. When I saw it, I was like, yes, like we're going to spend some money on these dudes, because there was some speculation that because Phillips just had the Achilles injury and that Waddle is probably going to be really expensive when he becomes a free agent a couple years from now, that they weren't even going to bother with these guys because obviously you saw the two edges that the Dolphins drafted in the draft. They picked one in the 1st round and the 5th round. A lot of people were speculating, hey, this might be the end of Chubb and Phillips, who were fantastic last season, obviously both coming off season-ending injuries. But we've got the 5th-year options. They're going to stick around, and I'm really happy. I want to see, after Christian Wilkins was shown the door this past season, this past free agency period, where they didn't want to sign him. Obviously, he got ridiculous amounts of money from the Raiders. But you want to see some loyalty from the team to the players. Sometimes I know these guys are expensive and they're going to get paid a lot of money, and it hurts the salary cap situation. But you do want to see sometimes you sign the guys that are really good to really good contracts, a la Kansas City, making Kelsey the highest paid tight end, or Chris Jones. They pay their players, the guys that are the bedrocks of the foundation of the team. So really excited to see these guys going to get picked up, and get to see them for at least another year.
Well, spoiler alert, we are going to talk about the Dolphins a little later in the show, coming up here shortly when we come to talk about the winners and losers of the NFL draft. But I'm excited for you, man. I'm excited for you. I think that I thought I read something that Tyreek Hill had restructured his contract to open up some more cap space.
Yeah, so did Jalen Ramsey as well.
Yeah, so it might allow another long-term deal post that 5-year option for at least one of these guys. Mm-hmm. And so I'm excited. I'm excited for you the same way that I was excited when when Detroit extended both Amon-Ra St. Brown and, of course, I can't say his name, our offensive lineman that's Penei Sewell, when they just renewed them 2 weeks ago. So excited for you and the future of your Miami Dolphins. Feels and good. When we talk about futures of NFL franchises, nothing is more exciting than NFL draft time. And we got it this past weekend. It started last Thursday out of Detroit, Michigan, breaking attendance records. They had over 700,000 people show up with over the 3 days to watch people come to a podium and read out names. Bill, before we get into the winners and losers of this draft, what do you make of that? That 700,000 people showed up to just hang out with their friends in their team's gear to watch people show up and just read names from a clipboard.
The NFL is an incredible marketing machine. I heard this said years ago, and it continues to be true, and it seems it's getting bigger and bigger. But the NFL is a year-long sport. It's the shortest season of all the major sports seasons. It only goes on for 5 months, a little over 5 months, including preseason, I guess more like 6. But, you've got baseball that goes from, their spring training starts in, the end of February, where they have pitchers and catchers show up, and then they're not done playing baseball until November. So, a 9-month preseason to end of playoffs. But a very short season. But after that, there's just so many things that are going on. You roll right into the new league year after the Super Bowl. The new league year is a year away. You start free agency period. Then you go into the speculation of the draft. The draft happens, and as soon as the draft happens, then we get rookie mini camps. Like, here we're gonna go to rookie mini camps and see how good the rookies are. And then we're going to roll into OTAs, and we're going to go to, then we're in training camp, and it just keeps rolling. It never stops. The NFL never stops. And good gracious, 700,000 people showed up in Detroit to watch. I saw the crowd, and I was like, what is is it the new year? Like, are we in New York? Like, this makes zero sense to me. And I guess it's just kind of like a celebration of football in a way.
I mean, you could see, like, during the NFL Network coverage, like, you could see, like, they had some bands out there playing music and stuff.
Yeah.
So, like, there's obviously some other things going on that entertain the crowd more so than just watching people read out names. But yeah, to me, it's crazy that between those 3 days, 700,000 people. I mean, in comparison, the largest football stadium in college football holds just over 100,000.
Right.
That's for one game. For over 3 days to bring in 7 times that.
Well, I think, Ryan, I honestly think there were 750,000 there on Thursday night for the first round. I think it was announced.
It couldn't have been that many. A million
I swear
people
to you,
out
they
there?
were all over the place. They were all over the place down there. I swear. I thought I saw that while the draft was still going on, that there were 700,000 people there.
No, because the overall, I was going to say the overall record for attendance before this past weekend was like somewhere around 500,000 to 600,000. It couldn't have been 700,000 people that first night. I don't think it would have been able to fit that many people.
Yeah, it's true.
But I digress. The NFL draft is when your team gets better or inevitably continues to dwindle, a la the Carolina Panthers, since being taken over by David Tepper, his owner. And we're going to talk some winners and losers of the 2024 NFL draft. Bill, this is sort of kind of an open forum here. I wrote some teams down that I thought we had as winners of this draft. Do you have any teams that you thought did better than others?
I mean, they're more like teams that didn't do that well.
Yeah.
It also depends on what your draft capital was. I mean, how many picks you had. It's tough to say that you did poorly if you didn't have a lot. I mean, my team didn't have a lot of picks. So did they do poorly? I don't think so. But it depends. I like what some of the teams did. And one of them might be I thought the Arizona Cardinals had a pretty freaking cool draft. They did some really neat stuff. I mean, is anybody not excited to watch? I mean, you might not be because you didn't rate him as your number one receiver. But is anybody not excited to see what Marvin Harrison at least does, right? He's a legacy player. His dad was a Hall of Famer, and we want to see what this kid can do. He's not even – what's weird about it is they talked about it multiple times when they were during the draft is he's not the fastest player in the draft. He's just super polished, like a super polished college prospect coming into the NFL. I don't know how that translates. So we're looking forward to seeing what he does, right? That's really exciting to see that. They just kept rolling. I mean, they picked Darius Robinson out of Missouri, who I don't know. They're saying he's fairly underrated. He was a pretty respected player coming out of Missouri, and then Max Melton, of course, came out of Rutgers, cornerback. They pick him in the second round, and they just kept going. I mean, they had a ton of picks. They had 4 third rounders. So they just kept rolling with a bunch of picks. They built a whole roster, on draft night. And I think the Cardinals, obviously, they had nowhere to go but up, playing in probably the toughest division in football. You've got a lot of really good teams in that division. I mean, you've got a team that went to the Super Bowl, a team that went to the playoffs, and a team that just barely missed the playoffs, and the Cardinals. So they really need to rebuild that roster, and I think they did a pretty good job.
Yeah, Arizona had a ton of picks. Philadelphia had a ton of picks. Yeah. I've got 3 teams that I consider winners of the NFL draft, and one's going to be pretty obvious, and that's the Detroit Lions. The Lions, in their first 2 rounds, drafted 2 of the top 10 cornerbacks in this draft, and that's the biggest need the Lions had. With their third pick, they traded up and got what could be a sleeper on the offensive line, a 6'8", 352-pound offensive lineman out of British Columbia. In their later picks, they added some more depth. I love what the Lions did. I think Bleacher Report gave them an A- grade or an A grade, one or the other, for what they were able to do in this draft. We talk about teams that have a rebuild ahead of them. The Los Angeles Chargers got the best offensive tackle in the draft, took 3 wide receivers to replace all of what they left at skill positions in the offseason, and added some decent pieces on defense to begin the rebuild under Jim Harbaugh the right way, considering that, like, we need to see what Justin Herbert's going to do with his big money contract. They went out and drafted some guys to try to help him out. My other winner, I just mentioned him, the Philadelphia Eagles, man. Last year, we sort of made the joke about them being the Georgia-Delphia Bulldogs with all the defensive players they took out of Georgia. They continue to build on youth on that defensive side, and they get 2 of the best 5 cornerbacks in this draft. Took a flyer on a legacy linebacker, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., out of Clemson in the 5th round. Got some skill players to add depth on offense. Obviously, I believe they just extended A.J. Brown, or not A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, I think they extended. They may have extended both of them. I know Devontae Smith took an extension. They obviously signed Saquon Barkley in the offseason. I believe they drafted Will Shipley to sit behind Saquon, so that maybe they're not going to split carries by any means. You don't go and sign Saquon Barkley to a big money contract to let him split carries. But again, just trying to add depth to keep that team fresh to make a playoff run, because I think you would agree. If I'm not mistaken, they were the last undefeated team in the NFC last year, and they sort of just dwindled down and fizzled out down the stretch.
Yeah, they really did.
And I think they drafted to try to avoid that this coming season. Bill, you mentioned Arizona. Are there any other teams that you consider being, relative winners of the 2024 draft?
I hate to say this. I feel like Kansas City had a fun draft.
Yeah.
I really hate to say that, because I feel like it's just a situation where the rich get richer. But they pick what is their biggest need? When you think about Kansas City, you think about them playing football last season. I feel like their biggest need was wide receiver. And with Rashee Rice's issues, obviously he's got issues with the law now, with his car accident situation and leaving the scene. We really thought going into the draft, and I think you and I both had them picking a wide receiver in the 1st round. They move up to pick a wide receiver in the 1st round, and they got a kind of a surprise. Now, I'm not sure if Xavier Worthy is going to be the player that everybody hopes he's going to be. John Ross obviously scared the crap out of us, because John Ross was fantastic in college, better than Xavier Worthy was in college, and then was super fast at the combine. Xavier Worthy was not fantastic in college. He was good, not fantastic, and was obviously super fast, the fastest wide receiver ever at the combine. I don't know if he's going to be that player that they hope he's going to be. I think he's a replacement for Tyreek Hill. I don't think he's as menacingly physical as Tyreek Hill can be. But it's still an interesting pick, because it's Patrick Mahomes with a weapon. And Patrick Mahomes might be the only quarterback in the NFL that this guy can't overrun his ball. So this is a neat pick. I think that's fun. And I think Kansas City, they obviously got an offensive tackle. There's other stuff in there. It's nothing really, really exciting, but I think the Xavier Worthy pick is just, that one's kind of fun. I think that'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, we're going to get into some of the bigger surprises out of the draft, and I've got a surprise as to why Kansas City was able to go up and get Xavier Worthy, because they traded it to get ahead of the Buffalo Bills, who infamously let go of Stephon Diggs in the offseason, and they needed a wide receiver, and sort of deliberately passed up Xavier Worthy with Kansas City. When it comes to losers of the NFL draft, again, same thing as with the winners. I've got 3 losers, and I think we can both agree on one of them, Bill, are the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons paid Kirk Cousins more money than any other quarterback in the offseason. I mean, they're being investigated for tampering with the way that they got Kirk Cousins out of Minnesota.
Yeah.
And then when the 8th overall pick, they draft Michael Penix Jr., the quarterback out of Washington, who both of us, you and I both said that we thought Michael Penix Jr. was going to be a decent NFL quarterback. But like you could see in the war room with the Falcons that everybody was kind of like, what the hell are we doing here? Like, what are we doing? Didn't we just pay? Kirk Cousins had no idea. Kirk Cousins didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
I don't think the owner knew what was going on. Like, it's almost like the owner had to go up to the GM and was like, hey, we just signed a quarterback, right? And then the GM defended the decision. As far as you're not going to pass on a guy like Michael Penix Jr. He can sit behind Kirk Cousins and learn for a while, and then he can be the quarterback of the future, which by all means, we've heard that song and dance before. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
But when there are so many other lingering needs for this Falcons roster, to take a quarterback in the top 10. And then you look at what else they went after. They drafted a bunch of guys on defense, but reached for guys like a defensive tackle. And I'm going to butcher this name, but it sounds like a dog barking. A defensive tackle out of Clemson, Arororo. His name is something Arororo. Like that's how it's spelled. Yes. And they didn't take another offensive player until drafting yet another running back in round 6, 1 year after drafting Bijan Robinson in the top 10. I mean, Bill, do you think anybody had a worse draft than the Atlanta Falcons?
To be fair, the Atlanta Falcons, their listed needs were everything defense but quarterback. They did list, I believe, their quarterback was their 5th overall need, even though they had Cousins. Cousins, 36 years old. He's an older guy, so he's only going to be there, say, 3 or 4 years. However, I think when you draft a quarterback to replace, or not even replace, but I think you wait till later rounds. Maybe not later rounds, but the 2nd, 3rd round, somewhere in there to pick a guy like Michael Penix. We would have thought he would have been there. But yeah, to pick him in the top 10 at all is absolutely crazy. I couldn't believe it when I heard it. I just like, oh no. Now the Falcons are the meme of the draft. That was the immediate reaction. I still don't get it. What is it with their owner's name? Arthur Blank? Is that his name?
So, yeah.
I think his last name affects the minds of his employees. That made zero sense.
Tim Costello in the chat wants to know what about his injuries. I don't think his injury is going to be a concern.
Yeah, Penix, he kind of has a tendency to get injured. He played like a warrior in that game against Michigan. They beat him up, and he did not get hurt in that game. So, bad luck with the one knee that I think he's torn the ACL in twice. Same knee. I think it was the right knee. So hopefully that doesn't. You don't think that doesn't usually happen to a quarterback. Hopefully that doesn't continue to happen. I think they'll try to keep him upright and not have him running around in the NFL. But yeah, strange draft for them.
Bill, I've got 2 more losers. Do you have a team that comes to mind that you thought did not set themselves up for future success in this year's draft?
Yes, I do have one. Actually, I mean, I really kind of excuse me. I have 2, but my favorite one is the Denver Broncos. Yeah. What are you doing? Drafting Bo Nix in the first round. Like, what are you doing? Come on. This is Drew Lock 2.0.
Yes.
If John Elway hasn't shown his lack of ability to run a team at this point, listen, I know you don't want to fire the golden boy, but come on. His one big move was signing Peyton Manning to take that decent roster to the Super Bowl. He's done nothing since. I can't remember when that was, but I'm pretty sure it was about 8 years ago. So
it's been a while.
Yeah. And then you get Drew Lock. You have it. That's a disaster. Russell Wilson, disaster. And now you draft Bo Nix in the top, 12th overall? Come on.
We made the joke last year that whoever drafted Anthony Richardson, the whole front office and coaching staff would be gone in 4 years. Sean Payton has a Super Bowl ring with the New Orleans Saints behind the quarterback Drew Brees.
And he allowed this. He sat there and allowed this.
How long does Sean Payton have to turn the Broncos around before he's gone and working on Fox again?
Sean Payton is a defensive coach. He was with the Saints. That was his thing. They weren't very good on defense for most of the season. And you remember Miami hung 70 on them and probably should have hung more. We kind of backed off and didn't set the record. But yeah, it's a good question. It's hard to speculate. I don't think they're going to win anything with Bo Nix. But what else did they have? I mean, I honestly couldn't tell you who their quarterback was. I know they traded for Zach Wilson, and now they came out today and said they're not gonna pick up Wilson's 5th-year option. Shocker! Like, I don't think anybody. We knew that. So I guess Bo Nix is going to be the starter, and I think that's a disaster. So
I can't wait. I can't listen.
Probably numbered.
I'm not an active hater of the Denver Broncos, but I'm gonna find some joy in watching them fail because of the continuously bad decisions they make.
We have a friend that we play video games with. You know, Matt.
Yeah. Probably don't want to say his
fan.
gamer tag.
He's a Broncos fan. Yeah, we don't say his gamer tag out loud now. But he's a Broncos fan, and I did not hear from him during the draft, which is likely he was not happy.
Sure. There's probably a reason why I didn't hear from him.
Yeah, I feel
during the draft. I'm gonna go through one of my other teams. I listen. I don't think the Bengals had a good draft. The Cincinnati Bengals notoriously struggles protecting Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
And there's a potential they're going to lose 2 wide receivers between now and next offseason. T. Higgins has asked for a release. Tyler Boyd, I don't believe, is on the roster anymore. Shannon Smith in the chat, how they disrespected Russ will come back and bite Denver. I don't disagree with you. But going back to the Bengals here, they needed some help on offense. They needed some help on the offensive line. They only drafted 1 wide receiver in this draft, and it wasn't the better ones, in my opinion. I mentioned that the inability to protect Joe Burrow. They drafted 2 offensive linemen, 1 in the first round, which is fine, but they didn't draft another one until the 7th round. They brought in Zach Moss to replace the departure of Joe Mixon, and they had plenty of running backs in this draft to draft as a potential starter of the future, someone to back up Moss. They didn't draft a running back in this draft, and they drafted 2 tight ends. I feel like if you look at like each like pick they made in this draft, that there was no plan. It was like they were just throwing darts at a dartboard, and if it stuck, okay, that's like it's not even players, it's positions. Like, hey, I think we need linebacker. Dink, all right, cool, we'll take him. Oh, we need a receiver. Boom, we'll take him. Tight end, yeah, I think we need a tight end to help out Bo Nix. Boom, we'll take that guy. Like, there was no strategy behind the Cincinnati Bengals draft, and when you've paid Joe Burrow a ton of money, and you're not really trying to help him out, like, again, one of his top receivers, T. Higgins, doesn't want to be there, you're going to have to pay Jamar Chase at some point. So, interesting to see what they did in this draft. A couple more comments. Shannon back in. Joe won't last long in Denver. Pedro, at least they didn't sign Zeke. It's a good point. The Cowboys did not draft a running back and sign Zeke Elliott back. Joe talking about Joe Burrow won't last long in Cincinnati. That's what Shannon was meaning. My other team that I want to talk about, Bill, and you're not going to be happy with me, is I don't think the Miami Dolphins drafted as well as they could have. I think they got a potential stud in Chop Robinson. Shout out to co-host of the Cat Cave, Michael Davis, because he was one of those guys early in this offseason that said that Chop Robinson could find his way into the first round, and he did just that. And they also addressed the need in drafting an offensive tackle in the second round of the draft. But when you look at this roster, you've got guys like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, who they just exercised a 5th-year option. You've got guys like Raheem Mostert, Devin Achane, and a slew of running backs. But they drafted another running back out of Tennessee, and they drafted 2 more wide receivers to sit behind Hill and Waddle. They even took a punter, Bill, in the 6th round instead of addressing other needs for this roster.
It was a safety.
I'm not saying no. There was when I looked on Bleacher Report, they drafted a punter in the 6th round.
The Dolphins? No, they drafted a safety.
I'm looking at it right now. I've got it up here. They drafted punter Patrick McCorris.
That's a safety.
Punter out of California.
He's a safety.
Why do they have him as punter listed on Bleacher Report?
Because
shame on Bleacher Report.
Yeah. We should call what's his name? No, not Bleacher. That's not Bleacher Report. Maybe Barstool.
That's Barstool. All right. Well, I stand corrected. I'll take that away, but I'll digress.
That's their worst pick. The punter, he could be a punter or a safety. The scouts didn't expect him to get drafted, so they must like him for some reason. Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm not saying that I absolutely hated their draft, but I feel like they with the quality of players in this draft and the needs for the Miami Dolphins, I think they could have done better than the draft. Bill, Miami is your team. What say you? What do you like and what do you dislike about the Dolphins draft?
I think. Well, let me say this first of all. Maybe I shouldn't have faith in my general manager, but at this point, I feel like I do. He's been the general manager since 2016, and we've seen first it was a slow progression. It took a little while to build the team, and there was coaching changes and whatnot happening there. But in the last 3 years or so, we've been building. 4 maybe. We'll say 4. We've been building, and it's been happening. And now we've made the playoffs 2 years in a row. I think we have the best team I think we've had since early 2000s. Great. I think that's pretty obvious. I feel like he has a plan, and I know what part of that plan entails. They got rid of Xavier Howard. They cut him with a post June 1st. What do they call it? Like a post June 1st designation. Thank you for the word. But so I think they get $18 million after June 1st. Their starting center is still out there as a free agent. He was the number 1 rated center in the NFL last season. by Pro Football Focus. He did tear his ACL. So maybe people don't want to, late in the season against the Titans. So maybe people don't want to sign him, but I don't believe that. I think there's a very big possibility that he is waiting for them to have the money to sign him. I think they're going to be, they call it the second round of free agency, or, free agency part 2 after the June 1st. I think they're waiting for that. So I think some of the needs that we're worried about, that's already in process. But I can defend just about every single one of their picks in one line per. I'm very happy about Chop Robinson. Everybody agrees he's the fastest guy off the line for any edge in the draft. Patrick Paul had the number 1 pass win rate in football last season, over 94% or something like that. He's insane against the pass. The running back Jalen Wright is absolute lightning. He's faster than Devin Achane in the 40, and he topped out at 23 miles an hour in one game that he ran, and led all of football in 50-plus runs, 50-yard runs. So he is absolute lightning, and they thought he was better than a 4th rounder, so they moved up to draft him. Muhammad Kamara, the knock on him is that he has short arms. So they drafted, and we talked about it. They drafted a T-Rex. Yeah. But he is an absolute monster. He had 13 sacks last season and absolutely dominated Colorado in the Colorado game against, when Colorado looked good. Malik Washington led all of football in receptions last season. He had over 100 catches in college last season, runs a 4.4, and had over almost 1,500 yards receiving.
He played for Virginia. That's a big deal.
Yeah, and Patrick McMorris, that's the only one I can't defend. And then the last receiver was Caleb Williams' favorite target at USC. So that's a 7th rounder. What are you going to get out of him? We don't know. But I like their picks. I'm like, okay, this makes sense. And it's funny, they give him bad grades, but everybody goes, ooh, Chop Robinson might be a stud. Patrick Paul, he's the best pass blocker in the draft. Jalen Wright, he's super fast, and that's what Miami likes. And then they go, well, Muhammad Kamara, he was the number 67 player on Mel Kiper's board. Miami drafted him at 158.
So I guess my question is, and I don't want to dwell on this too much longer because we still got a lot to get to. And we only got about half an hour left. Drafting Jalen Wright, you can't have 3 running backs on the field at the same time.
I just think
what's going to happen? What's going to happen in the backfield of Miami between Mostert, Achane, and your rookie?
How many games did Achane play last season?
He did get hurt, and that took him out a lot.
He played 10. So now they've drafted his twin. He's the same exact type of player. He runs the same speed. He's actually quicker in the 40, and he's faster than Tyreek when they get in the open field. So I don't know. I was like, what? And then I started reading about him, and everybody's like, this guy is lightning. He's literally lightning.
I envy your optimism.
I like him now, and I have faith. What other holes do you want us to plug? The only thing that I think they missed that they probably could have done is maybe gotten a little bit more in the offensive line, but they retained 3 out of 4 starters last year, signed a starting center in free agency, and are just kind of looking for another guard. And there are some still out there in free agency, so that might happen. And then defensive line, where they lost Christian Wilkins. They signed like 7 dudes to take his place that they're going to try to figure out which one is the best.
Who's your starting tight end going into this next season?
Jonnu Smith. They signed Jonnu Smith in free agency.
That's not a terrible pickup. I think, considering you've got a guy like Jaheim Bell that got drafted by the Patriots in the 7th round of this draft, I think you could have been better off, especially when we talk about Patrick McMorris. You could have gone a guy like Jaheim Bell. And I'm like, all right, that's a valuable pick to see if he works out, because Jaheim Bell, when he in the 2 years he played at South Carolina, was a Swiss Army knife. He lined up at running back, he lined up at fullback, at tight end, at receiver. And so it'll be interesting to see how he gets.
They might have had him on the board. I don't know if he would have slipped. If he would have slipped to them where they ended up picking Todd Washington, maybe that would have been their pick. But they jumped back to whatever they could at that time. But yeah, I agree with you. It's how it falls to you too, right? They didn't really make a ton of moves. They moved up. The interesting one was to get that running back. They actually traded a 3rd rounder from next year for a 4th rounder this year. So they really like the guy.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Bill, we want to talk about biggest surprises of this year's draft. Obviously, we've already talked about Michael Penix Jr. We don't really need to rehash that.
That'd be it.
I'm gonna give you my surprises. I've got a few of them. I think that Brock Bowers falling to the Raiders at 13, when every other mock draft had the Jets taking him at 10. I've made the case before. I think he's going to be a better tight end in the NFL than your guy Kyle Pitts out of Florida that's playing for the Falcons right now. I really like Brock Bowers, and I could not believe he fell down to the Raiders. Kool-Aid McKinstry was touted as one of the best cornerbacks in this draft. He fell out of the first round into the second. We talk about all the guys that Jim Harbaugh was high on out of Michigan. Blake Corum goes to Los Angeles, but not to the LA Chargers with Jim Harbaugh. He goes to the LA Rams.
Right.
We already talked about Bo Nix getting drafted in the first. Crazy. The Buffalo Bills didn't trade back once. They traded back twice. The Buffalo Bills deliberately passed on both Xavier Worthy and Xavier Legette in the first round and ended up drafting their wide receiver with the 33rd overall pick that they got from the Panthers. And then I think the biggest mystery from a lot of pundits covering the draft was Spencer Rattler's fall all the way to the 5th round. It looked like he wasn't going to get drafted. There was the story that they tried to say on NFL Network coverage of the draft that there's probably executives that were looking back at the reality show that he did in high school that he didn't come off all that well. Other people came out and defended it and said that was garbage. It was a nonsense take. And then I believe Adam Schefter came out and said the likely landing spot for Spencer Rattler, which would have been in the 2nd or 3rd round, would have been either to the Falcons or to the Vikings. Was it the Vikings? I think it was the Vikings. Maybe it's the Broncos, not the Vikings, the Broncos. The Falcons or the Broncos. And the fact that both the Falcons and the Broncos, covered their quarterback need in the first round meant that all the quarterback needy teams were off the board for the 2nd, 3rd, and so on and so forth. And so Spencer Rattler falls to the 5th round of the New Orleans Saints. And I think Spencer Rattler has a phenomenal opportunity down in New Orleans because we both know that Derek Carr is not going to probably stay healthy a full season.
And he's inconsistent too.
He's inconsistent. We don't know. We don't know how much longer he's got in the NFL. He is getting older. I want to say he's early 30s, but he's still getting older. And so Spencer Rattler's got a really good opportunity here to. We talked about Michael Penix getting his feet wet, sitting behind Kirk Cousins. Spencer Rattler's got an even better opportunity, and a better opportunity to start if Derek Carr gets hurt, because I think he's better than any backup, including Taysom Hill, on that roster down in New Orleans. But those are my biggest surprises. The last thing we're going to talk about the NFL draft, because we're going to have 20 minutes to get to UFL talk here. And if you recalled last week, Baker Bill and I did a mock draft where we drafted only the first round for every NFL team. And there's a scoring system that Bill found, and we scored our mock drafts. And with the scoring system, I beat Banker Bill 140 to 137 with our picks. Bill, explain to the audience where the scoring system was, how it worked, and how it was that I was able to overcome your mock draft over this.
And actually, technically, Ryan, so here's something else I kind of messed up, but it's tough to do this. I'll go over the scoring here in a second, but I want to say Ennis Rakestraw, that the Lions ended up picking in the 2nd round. I probably should have gotten a point for. I scored him as 0. I scored him as 0 because he wasn't picked in the first round. But he was picked by the Lions, which is what I had them picking in the first round. They didn't pick him in the first round. They picked him in the 2nd. So I probably should have gotten a point for that, but it's okay. He still beat me by 2. All right. So here's how it goes.
Here, I'll fix it on the ticker. You're welcome. Here we go.
Fantasy Pros has a scoring system, and here's how the scoring system breaks down. It seeks to reward correctly identifying the following things in an NFL mock draft: how each player's predicted draft slot compared to their actual draft slot, how each player ranks among their playing position, which players, and that's what you were actually really good at, by the way. You were really good at understanding which players were the best players in their position group. That's where you beat me. I had a lot of stuff correct. Point is, when I would go through it, I'd be like, oh, he scored points for that guy again. Oh, man. And that's what you got me on every time. Which positions, the third one is which positions each team will draft in the first, which positions each team will draft in the first round, and 4, which players will land on which teams. There are 10 possible points for each predicted pick, and therefore a total of 320 possible points. And these are, you get 4 points possible based on the player's draft slot. You get 3 possible points based on the player's rank within their position. And it says the predicted player must have been drafted in the 1st or 2nd round to get any points for this. The third one is 2 points if the team drafted the predicted position in the 1st round, not necessarily the same player. And number 4 is 1 point if the team drafted the predicted player. And that's where the Rakestraw comes in with the 1 point because he was drafted in the second round. With all that being said, I beat you very early in the round. I was much better than you were. But you had things like Joe Alt going a little closer to his draft position, which helped you get a couple more points on him. I had the Titans picking a tackle where you had them picking a wide receiver. So very early, I was really, really beating you. And then,
well, I also got cute.
You did get a little cute
and let
Marvin
Harrison go.
Yeah,
that's
the
that.
Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors thing. Yeah, that was bad. I did get a little cute too. I picked Roma Dunze over Malik Neighbors. Probably should not have done that. Joe Alt would have been the smart pick there. So I think we were both getting a little cute. I was only ahead of you through like the first seven picks. And then it started to fall off where it was kind of in the middle. You did really well around 18 and 19 with the Bengals and Rams. You had 2 picks, Jared Verse and Troy Fontanu, that went to the correct teams. The Jared Verse one was dead on. It got you 10 points. It actually got me 10 points, but then the Fontanu pick, you got 8 for that one. I had Amarius Mims in that position. So it's really cool. You can see the breakdown. I sent Ryan the graph. If he wants to post it on our Facebook page, you can see how the graph works. People can check my math too. It was really hard to go through every player and go, okay, how many points? Okay, does that, hang on that. And it was tough. It was tough. But in the end, I think what it comes down to is Ryan beat me by 2 points. And the honest truth is, Ryan, we were both, now granted, there was a lot of crazy picks in this draft. So it's not like you're going to get 320 every time because you got things that, like Michael Penix going number 8. That makes 0 sense. That's going to be a terrible pick because we both had him out of the first round. So we got 0, I think a 0 for that one. Actually, no, we did not. We got 2 because of, well, it's hard to explain. Yeah, for that position, we ended up with 2. But yeah, there was some crazy stuff. So we would have had 320 possible points. You scored 140. I scored 138. Obviously terrible. But, I mean, hey, it's close. We were both close. And this is what I want people to do. So next season, if we could figure out how to get this really automated, that'd be really fun. I don't know how you can write up a script to do this. But you can basically do this with this scoring system like you're doing the bracketology with the NCAA tournament. People can literally put in there and then figure out who the best, with the point scoring system, who the best scorers are and figuring out where the players are going to go.
Well, Pedro's excited to see what we talk about fantasy football coming up. And listen, it'll be here before you know it.
Yeah, well, it's still far.
It's away, but it's I do want to give one more shout out to Michael Davis. He correctly drafted, or he correctly picked in his mock draft the Carolina Panthers taking tight end Jatavian Sanders out of Texas in their 4th round pick. Like absolute perfectly. So kudos to Michael Davis. Listen, the NFL draft is come and gone. It was a very, very exciting draft. A lot of people were there to enjoy it. A lot of teams got better. Some maybe didn't. Only time will tell as we move forward here, as we're kind of starting to hit outside of like rookie mini camps, the NFL dead period. So, all we have to talk about now is the UFL, and we get to talk UFL week 5 that took place this past weekend in the midst of the NFL draft. And there was 2 games on Saturday night at 7:00. I guess hold on. Jason Buck wants to get in here. The Panthers didn't take a Clemson player, and Clemson is mad. So, so we'll throw that out there real quick too.
I like it.
Yeah, I guess the UFL was trying to avoid NFL draft coverage, so they had 2 games at 7 p.m. on Fox. And I'm not sure how many people watched them. I haven't seen the ratings yet. But the San Antonio Brahmas took out the Arlington Renegades 25-15.
I saw the ratings.
Go ahead.
And they were actually pretty good. Right around, I want to say 800, 900,000 per game. All weekend long was pretty good.
I don't remember what I was doing. We might have been out Saturday night, and that's why I didn't. Oh, I'm sorry. I left off boo-hoo for the Clemson fans who are upset that the Panthers didn't draft anybody from Clemson.
I mean, Clemson has to put out better players for them to get drafted. I mean, they only had a couple.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I say that right.
Roro is one of them.
In Florida, 1 draft pick. 1.
Ooh,
Ricky Pearsall was
wild.
the only Florida Gator picked.
That's crazy. Carolina even had like 3 or 4. That's nuts. Let's talk San Antonio Brahmas. They go improved to 4-1. Quentin Dormany, based on his stat line, didn't look great. 164 yards, 3 interceptions in this game. Bill, what'd you see out of San Antonio? And I know you talked about watching the highlights from this game. What did you see out of San Antonio? Are they sort of a contender or a pretender here sitting at 4-1 on the season.
I watched the extended highlights, not just the highlights. This wasn't a best 10 plays type of thing. This was 18 minutes worth of highlights rolling through plays. Quentin Dormady he threw 3 interceptions. They were not all his fault. One of them went right off the chest of one of his receivers, basically chest and hands, and gets intercepted. I think they're contenders. I think you and I have talked about many times with the XFL and with the UFL that you have to have a balanced attack on offense. And I think they showed this week that they do have that. They do have some decent offensive line play. Dormady has an arm. I really like watching Dormady play. He really does. That's part of his problem. He throws it too hard, and his receivers don't catch it. But yeah, they were able to run the football this weekend. And Arlington, obviously, nobody can figure them out. They played St. Louis very tough, and then they just come in. They were terrible in the fourth quarter. Terrible.
The DC Defenders were the best team in the XFL last year, and they lost to the only team, the worst team in the league in Orlando last year. Their only win was against DC. And Arlington plays team stuff. I mean, Arlington, first of all, let's start off. You talked about the run game. John Lovett averaged 7.3 yards a carry in this game, found the end zone twice.
Yep.
And then when you look at Arlington's side, they tied the game with just under 6 minutes to play in the third quarter, and San Antonio outscored them 10-0 in the fourth quarter. To take the win. Arlington, you're still your last winless team in the UFL, despite what looks like pretty decent play from Luis Perez. 270 yards, a touchdown in this game. They had another leading running back in this game with Day Hunter, a running back out of Liberty, had 33 yards rushing with 3.7 yards a carry. Listen, I don't know what more to say about Arlington. Last year, they did the same thing, and they came back and won the XFL. I think they're cooked at this point, Bill. 0-5 halfway through the season.
Yeah, I don't
there's
feel
no
good
coming
about
back for the Arlington.
And they'd have to almost run the table. You've got 2 good teams in their division, or conference, I guess they call it. You've got San Antonio and St. Louis are in their division. They're not. Both those teams, 1-loss teams. They are done. It's 0-5. Yeah. You're not making it up. It's not going to happen. You're not going to have those teams lose 4 out of 5 games. It's not going to happen. But like you said, Luis Perez continues to play well. They just can't run the football. They can't run the football at all.
Well, you talk about a team that can run the football. The Birmingham Stallions take another win. Houston falls to 1-4 in this game. Birmingham gets the win 32-9. But here we go with this back and forth quarterback. This week, the only undefeated team in the UFL in Birmingham goes back to Adrian Martinez, that just throws for just over 50% or completes just over 50% of his passes. But he had 9 carries for 138 yards in this game, 15.3 yards a carry for Birmingham. Larry Roundtree, running back out of Missouri. I don't know if you probably remember that name if you watch SEC football. He averaged 5.6 yards per carry in this game. Deion Kane, your leading receiver here. Once again, they led 26-9 at halftime, and they held Houston scoreless for 3 of the 4 quarters. I think it's safe to say that Birmingham is the odds-on favorite to win the UFL. Would you agree?
Oh yeah. What's crazy about that team is you have 2 quarterbacks that are playing well week in, week out. They're rotating between the 2 quarterbacks. This week it was Adrian Martinez. And Martinez, he is terrifying. He is the Lamar Jackson of the UFL.
Of the UFL, yeah.
He is. Watching the highlights, you're like, this dude's really fast. As soon as the pocket breaks down, he just starts running, and nobody can run with him. Not a linebacker in the league can run with this guy. And so he just runs into the secondary, and he's got 10, you said it, he averaged 15 yards a carry. So how do you stop this guy? You got to keep him in the pocket, but then he can throw. He threw a beautiful pass. I forget which tight end, Sternberger. Sternberger, drops in a beautiful pass over his shoulder for a touchdown. And at that point, you just go, "What do you do? What do you do?" He's in the pocket now. He's throwing BBs. Like, what do you do here? They're good, man. They're really good. Birmingham is a really good football team. They're fun to watch. They can run the football. They can pass the football, and they play defense. So they're gonna be really tough to beat coming down to the end of the season. I cannot wait. I'm hoping right now, and I like I said, if I almost promise, I'm rooting for San Antonio for the most part, but I hope that at some point St. Louis and Birmingham have to clash, because I cannot wait to watch that, because St. Louis is actually fully loaded now with Ja'Cour Pearson healthy.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I don't disagree with you. I'd love to see that matchup. Oh, if you look at the other side of it, Houston is making their case for the worst team in the UFL as they fall to 1-4. Reed Sinnett, starting quarterback, gets 203 yards with a touchdown, but he also throws an interception in this game. You talk about having balanced attack. Houston did not have a balanced attack. The team combined for 2.6 yards a carry and 36 rushing yards. That is the whole team had 36 rushing yards in this game. You have a new leading receiver for Houston in this game, Justin Hall, a wide receiver out of Ball State, with 11 catches for 93 yards. The defense finished with 2 sacks, but they only scored 9 points in the second quarter and didn't score any other point in the game. I don't think we need to go into more detail. Houston is bad. They were a little bit better when they were the Houston Roughnecks of the XFL. They are not good.
Different team.
The UFL roster. Yeah,
this
they are
the
not good with the UFL yesterday.
Bad offensive line. Bad offensive line play all day. That was the reason Sinnett threw his interception. Watched it on the highlight. He just overthrows the receiver because he's getting smacked. It's just bad offensive line play. They can't run either.
Well, the next game on the docket was the game that I was looking forward to watching the most, and it was the early midday Sunday game, and it did not turn out to be all that exciting as the St. Louis Battlehawks absolutely decimate the DC Defenders 45-12. Let's start off in St. Louis, who improves to 4-1. AJ McCarron only threw 24 passes in this game, but threw for 213 yards and 2 touchdowns. You talk about being balanced. They had 52 yards on the ground from Jacob Sailors. Hakeem Butler had himself a day. My guy, big man Hakeem Butler, 2 touchdowns, 6 catches, $147 receiving, 3 interceptions by the St. Louis defense. They only led 15-12 at halftime, but they exploded in the second half. You mentioned you want to see St. Louis versus Birmingham.
Oh yeah,
Bill. What I mean, it's again we're talking about between at this point St. Louis and San Antonio being the best team in the XFL conference. At this point, would you make the case that St. Louis is the best team in the XFL?
I think so. It's definitely between San Antonio and St. Louis, and if I remember correctly, St. Louis beat San Antonio. I think that's San Antonio's loss. So, yeah, St. Louis is the best team. They're the most balanced team. They have the best passing attack by far. Even though it feels like McCarron really doesn't have to do a whole lot. He's not throwing for massive amounts of yards, but it's a better offense. They put up 45 points. A lot of turnovers. Jordan Thomas was terrible.
You we're gonna get to DC in a second, but are you ready for some good news?
Sure.
Not this coming weekend, but in week 7, St. Louis Battlehawks I want to make sure I have this right. St. Louis Battlehawks at the Birmingham Stallions, 3:00 Saturday, May 11th on Fox.
All right, so I have to set my alarm early that day to make sure I'm on the couch for that game. Okay.
I'm more than likely going to be in an improv class. I'm not going to be able to watch the game
live. I'm sorry to hear that.
It's a full day improv class that I'm going to go enroll in. All right, let's go over to DC, a team that has fallen now to 2-3. One of the best teams in the XFL last season. You talk about Jordan Ta'amu playing absolutely terrible. We got some comments in the chat. I don't want to skip over these. Shannon Smith, I'm embarrassed thinking that Jordan Ta'amu would be the MVP.
He's
not been good.
No.
And Shauna says that y'all are going to be busy for Katie's birthday.
Oh,
so we'll probably just have to DVR the game and watch it later. But nevertheless, let's talk about DC here.
It'll be a Sunday deal.
DC for a second here. Ta'amu, 3 interceptions. He did get the ball going on the ground a little bit, 6.5 yards per carry. Your leading running back, your leading rusher in this game for DC, which is where they've struggled all season, is mainly the reason why they sit at 2-3. Your leading running back, Saquandre White, had 15 carries, 33 yards, a mere 2.2 yards per carry. Your leading receiver had 37 yards receiving and a touchdown. They did get to AJ McCarron 3 times. You got a cornerback out of Dubuque, wherever that is, that had 11 tackles and 2 tackles for loss. But I don't think that DC is one of the worst teams in the UFL, but they obviously can't keep up with teams like St. Louis and Birmingham at this point.
No, and I think San Antonio is better. I think every team we're watching struggle in the UFL. You've got these mediocre teams like DC, Michigan. Every team that's struggling, it's based off the offensive line. If they have any kind of running game, they're a better team, and that's how good their offensive line is, right? So they're also not protecting the quarterback. I mean, Ta'amu threw for 101 yards and 3 interceptions. And the interceptions were bad. They were except for one of them, they were his fault.
Yeah.
Just bad throws. So it's bad. It's bad offensive line play, and I don't see DC turning it around until they learn how to block. It's unfortunate, but like you said, they're not a terrible team, and they have nice pieces in place, but just the offensive line's not playing.
The other part of it is the other really bad news out of DC is that you can no longer, as a fan, go to the section and add on to the beer snake yourself. Infamously, if you haven't been paying attention at DC Stadium, they have what's called the beer snake. It basically comes from field level all the way up to the upper deck. And you used to be able just to go into that section and put your cup up. And now they're forcing you to leave the cup with somebody who is sitting in that section so that they can add it to the beer snake. I wonder if they're going to change that policy, but I digress. If they don't get any better, they're not going to be able to get fans in the stadium to build a beer snake.
You remember last season, Ryan, they actually outlawed the beer snake until the fans said, heck no, we're not going to show up if you don't let us do the beer snake. And they immediately were like, yes, the beer snakes, we encourage it. And then it became a TV thing. So everybody loves it now.
Yeah. Well, the last game on the docket this past weekend, Michigan Panthers at the Memphis Showboats. Michigan, the 35-18 win over Memphis. The big news out of this game, despite Michigan getting the big win, is their kicker. Bates, is it Jake Bates that has hit the big leg kicks all season long? Went 1 of 3 for field goals this weekend, missing a 62-yarder and a 58-yarder. But it doesn't really matter because Michigan was able to find the end zone. Danny Etling is your new starting quarterback at LSU, had 175 yards in the air, but also had a rushing touchdown. They blew up on the ground. You talk about, it seems like every team in the UFL that is finding success is finding it on the ground. West Hills out of Slippery Rock, 82 yards on the ground, 5.1 yards a carry with 3 rushing touchdowns. That may be a UFL record. I'd have to go look in the record books. And then Matthew Colburn, running back out of Wake Forest via Irmo, South Carolina, 4.5 yards per carry with a touchdown of his own, 68 yards on the ground. Bill, I keep going back and forth, man. I like Michigan, but I'm not sold on them yet. What are your thoughts watching this game as they get another win over a pretty bad Memphis team?
I mean, they have decent offensive line play. I actually watched this full game, and they were just shoving Memphis around. And you see it with the rushing statistics. I mean, West Hills goes off. They had a second running back play really well, but Matthew Colburn, who we've never heard of him, and here he is doing having a good game. They just they played better offensively because their offensive line was playing well. You should feel pretty good, except for they don't have much for quarterback. I mean, Danny Etling was decent, but not great. And they didn't really ask him to do much because they were doing so well on the ground. They're not going to be able to do that against the good teams. Birmingham's not going to get shoved around like that. So I would feel good about it. They're the best. They're the second best team in the USFL conference.
Yeah. I mean, Kai Nakua, brother of Puka Nakua, gets another interception in this game for Michigan. Let's go over to the Memphis side. They've got a new starting quarterback. Do the 1-4 Memphis Showboats. Troy Williams, a quarterback out of Utah, 248 passing yards in this game, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Again, it's the common theme we keep talking about. Darius Victor, 1.9 yards per carry in the game. Your leading receiver, Daywood Davis, a wide receiver out of Western Kentucky, did have himself a day, 6 catches, a 101 yards and a touchdown. They did get to Danny Etling 3 times defensively. But I mean, sitting at 1-4, I mean, they're right there at the bottom of the USFL division. You would have to think that the season's basically, I mean, one more loss and Memphis is out of it. Wouldn't you agree?
Even with Daywood Davis having a nice game, that was with an 82-yard, the longest play in the history of the UFL was Daywood Davis right before halftime. He had an 82-yard reception. There was actually a short throw that Kai Nakua made a bad play, bad angle from the safety position, missed the tackle, and he went 82 yards for the touchdown. That was a dink and dunk offense, and that's not going to get done. And I just think Memphis they're going to continue to struggle. Troy Williams played okay. He had a pretty decent day. 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Too much bad with good. So yeah, I don't feel good about Memphis. The teams that are bad, we're seeing that they're bad. I mean, you've got 4 teams that are pretty bad and 4 teams that are solid. So it's going to be fun coming down to the end of it that, we watch these teams, the good teams actually, meeting up and playing, meaningful, fun games to see if we can separate these top teams. But yeah, it's Michigan definitely in it. Memphis is not.
I mean, listen, Michigan sits at 3-2 as Memphis sits at 1-4. If you look at the standings, Birmingham's got a 2-game lead over anybody else in that division, with Michigan sitting in second place at 3-2. They're not quite out of it yet. Unlike the XFL division, where you've got both St. Louis and San Antonio at 4-1, your next best team are the DC Defenders at 2-3, and then the Arlington Renegades done sitting at 0-5. It'd be a lot easier of a road for a team like Memphis to make the playoffs out of the USFL than it would be, say, the Arlington Renegades or even the DC Defenders at this point, despite only being 2-3. Bill, we got another weekend full of UFL action here, and they've spaced them out a little better this week. The Birmingham Stallions at the Memphis Showboats kick us off this weekend, Saturday, 12 p.m. kickoff, a noon kickoff on ABC. Birmingham, a whopping 11-point favorite over the Memphis Showboats. We just got done talking about how bad Memphis was. I think Birmingham covers this pretty easily.
Oh, yeah.
Let's say you.
Yeah, Birmingham's a much, much better team than Memphis.
Listen, if you want to watch some decent football, you want to see a decent football team play, watch the Birmingham Stallions, because there's a solid chance that somebody on this Birmingham team will wind up in the NFL next season. Let's go over to the second game on Saturday, a 3 p.m. kickoff over on Fox as the St. Louis Battlehawks play host to the Houston Roughnecks. The Battlehawks, a 12.5-point favorite. Again, another really bad team versus another really good team. That's why the spread is set the way that it is. Bill, you think St. Louis covers this 12.5-point spread?
I unbelievably actually do. There's going to be 30,000 people in the Dome again. They're at home. That's a fantastic environment to play football, and 12.5 is a tremendous amount, but St. Louis has a fantastic offense, and Houston does not. So I think they cover.
Hot take. I don't think Houston scores in this game. I think they get shut out on the road at St. Louis.
I think Memphis is in danger of not scoring at home against Birmingham. But yeah, I can see that Houston. I mean, Reed Sinnett played pretty well. I think Reed Sinnett takes them to at least one touchdown, but it's not going to be fantastic. They just they have no offensive line play.
Yeah, unfortunately, when it comes to the Saturday games, they're both going to more than likely be blowouts. But if you look over to the Sunday games, the Arlington Renegades look to get their first win on the road at the Michigan Panthers. Michigan, a 4-point home favorite. Bill, I think Arlington covers this. I think they play teams tough. I know the game got away from them this past weekend, but Arlington has the capability of surprising some teams and staying close. I don't think they win this game, but I think this game gets closer than 4 points. Give me Arlington to cover. What say you?
I disagree. I think Michigan's a better team. I really do. They can run the football. Arlington can't. I think Etling is a better. He's as good a quarterback as EJ Perry. He was definitely serviceable this week. So I think Michigan covers the 4. It's amazing that Arlington continues to lose with Luis Perez leading the XFL. I said it again. Well, the XFL conference and the UFL in passing. How about that? Good save. They have a great passing game, but they cannot win football games. They find a way to lose every week, and obviously last week got beat pretty bad. So I think Michigan does the same thing.
That is a Sunday 1:00 kickoff over on Fox, like a regular football game in the NFL season. And then the 4:00 game on Sunday afternoon, the San Antonio Brahmas, a 1-point road favorite at the DC Defenders. We just talked about the fact that we both think San Antonio is a better team. The DC Defenders can't get the ball going on the ground. DC's at home, and they're gonna have hopefully a ruckus crowd, because I think if DC loses this game, they're gonna lose the fans and their season is gonna slip away from them. Bill, who gets this game? It's essentially a pick 'em. Who do you got? DC hosting San Antonio.
Well, Jordan Ta'amu got benched in the previous game. He played so poorly that they actually benched him. And I forget, it was the Orlando Guardians' third quarterback as their backup. We thought they had the guy from Vegas last season.
I'm pulling it up right now because they did bench him, and I did see that. But please continue.
I would still imagine Ta'amu's going to be the starter, just, write it off as a bad game, a really bad game. So I think that, man, this is tough. What did you say the spread was? The Brahmas are 1-point favorites.
DeAndre Francois, the quarterback out of Florida State.
Yep. That was the Orlando Guardians' third-string quarterback last season. Did get some playing time with Orlando and was absolutely horrific. So I don't see him continuing to be the starter, or I don't see him being the starter over Ta'amu in DC. I think they're going to ride with Ta'amu. So I think DC is going to bounce back, man. I want San Antonio to win this game. I've been rooting for San Antonio. Dormady obviously having some issues last week, but I think DC, even though they cannot run the football, I think they need to figure it out this week. Being at home, I think they cover a point.
I'm right there with you.
They don't tie.
Like
They win.
Yeah. Yeah. I like DC in this game. I think they're gonna again, they're playing for a playoff spot at this point. At 2-3, they're sitting behind San Antonio for that last playoff spot. They need to get this win, and I think they do this weekend. Bill, we almost made time. We're a little bit over time, but now we are in the overtime segment of the show. Anything else you want to add before we sign off for the evening?
The only thing I would like to talk about is the UFL, and we'll never get The Rock to tweet our podcast here, which we could. It would be great. Thanks, The Rock. Worthless. No, I'm kidding. That's terrible.
You're definitely not going to get him to
not
the show
like now. Can you smell what he's not cooking? But let's see here. What I wanted to say was I think the UFL needs to go back to the XFL's scheduling next season. Hopefully, I know they hurried this season to get this situation together, and it ended up being a late season schedule. I'm not able to watch the games now because the weather's turning good and we're doing things and things are happening. I mean, you just saw my wife's in the chat saying we'll be busy. That's what's happening at this time of year. We're starting to get into good weather. I think you're missing out on, TV and probably fans in the stands because other stuff is already happening. There's too much stuff going on around the country now that we're not getting the support for the UFL that we probably could, including myself. I haven't been able to watch these games. I end up going to watch the highlights. So let's please next season, Rock, or whoever's in charge of this, go back to starting a week or two after the Super Bowl.
So I'll see that, and I wouldn't say I would raise you something else. I'm not disagreeing with that point, but at the same time, you want to feel like you miss football in order to have that yearn for that spring league. And despite the fact that people aren't going to the games unless you're in St. Louis or DC, they're getting people watching the games. They're getting more viewers than the UFL and the US or the XFL and the USFL did last season. But I've still got guys in my group chat that are saying, I'm not going to watch the UFL. I'm going to watch real football when the NFL comes back. I think these are the same kind of guys that don't watch college football because they don't think college football is real football. But I digress. The UFL is putting on some good football. If there's guys that you've rooted for in the NFL in the past, I mean, we have been the biggest proponents of making this league survive. Now, something came out earlier this week where they have some sort of program in place for the 2025 season. So we are going to get the UFL in 2025. We don't know much post 2025, but they want this league to survive. To your point, when the weather starts getting nice and we have to go out and do things in the yard, or we want to go out to the brewery late at night, and 9 times out of 10, I mean, we're in that part of year where we got the NBA playoffs, the NHL playoffs, spring baseball, college baseball is getting towards the end of their season. So there's a lot of stuff going on.
NASCAR's happening,
exactly. Yeah. Golf, the PGA Tour is in full swing, pun intended. But the UFL is giving us an opportunity to continue watching football outside of just speculating and watching the NFL draft, outside of wondering who's going to go into the transfer portal and play for your college team next season. The UFL is giving you live, real football with real players that are putting their lives, their careers on the line to get that next shot at the NFL. And we want to make this league survive and last. So if you're not watching the games, at least go back, watch the highlights. At least try to pay attention. They have a really nice app that you can get on your smartphones that does a really good job of giving you, I mean, better than the XFL and the USFL websites last year. Do a really good job of breaking down stats. They've got some decent articles on there for you. But the UFL is real football. And we want this league to survive because it gives some of these guys another chance to continue to live their dream in playing football. A.J. McCarron was the feel-good story last year. Right now, we're seeing Adrian Martinez and Matt Corral kind of live that out for themselves this year. Jake Bates. Mm-hmm. And more than likely, Jake Bates, despite going 1 of 3 last weekend, he's going to be on an NFL roster, at least in training camp. And I wouldn't be surprised if he made an NFL roster going into the regular season. All right, folks, we went a little bit late for you tonight. Not as late as we did last week, But we're going to let you out of here. Just a quick reminder, go to facebook.com/tapouts and touchdowns. Follow us, like us there. You can always watch this show live every Wednesday when we go live for our football shows. Same thing if you go over to X @tapouts and TDs. We go live on there Wednesdays as well. We post some of the same stuff on there. But there's a lot more retweets, reposting and stuff going on from that account that you get to kind of see a little more of my personal homerism over on X. But if you don't want to watch it on either of those platforms, you can go over to YouTube @tapouts and touchdowns on YouTube. You can watch us live on Wednesdays. You can watch old shows over on YouTube, even the shows where we didn't go live and we've got pre-recorded. You can go back and watch those and the wrestling shows that we've put on YouTube there. Another platform that you can follow me personally is on Instagram @RyanWFrick. Posted a reel from this show about a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and it got 9,000 views on Instagram. Make sure you're following me on Instagram because I'm now using my Instagram account to help promote the show as well. So if you already aren't doing so, follow me on Instagram, tell your friends, share my profile on Instagram to get some more traffic to that account because it got some positive feedback. It was a good time. And more than likely, we're gonna have more going on Instagram as well.
With all due respect, Ryan, I don't care.
Yeah, with all due respect, I don't care. That's perfect.
If you haven't seen the reel, that's what that's from, and it's hilarious. Actually, I made my wife laugh out loud with the reel.
Yes, go look, go to the Instagram. I'll put it back on the screen @RyanWFrick. You'll be able to see all the posts that I've made. There were personal posts that I made when it was still a private account. It's now a public business account. I think it was the second to last thing that I posted on there, and it's phenomenal. Go and like it. You can share it with your friends, whatever you want to. But I will be posting more to Instagram to help promote this show. But thanks to everybody who came to join the conversation tonight, whether it was Facebook, YouTube, or X. Thank you for watching live. Thank you for joining in the chat box. Next week, we're at an NFL dead point, so we're gonna be talking UFL next week. Still don't know when we're gonna do another wrestling episode. I got a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, so we're probably just gonna stick with football for a little while, at least through the end of the UFL season. And we've got 5 more weeks of the regular season in the UFL, so we're not going anywhere. Thanks for everybody who was a part of the show tonight. Thanks to my co-host, Banker Bill, for having the fun conversation with me as well. For Banker Bill, it's your guy, Bully Rye, and we'll see you next time right here on Tap Outs and Touchdowns.